The recording has started. All participants are muted.
Oh,
Maybe I should mute Ed too if he's going to be all tired and stuff. Alright everybody, hey, guess what? It is currently Sunday, August 12th, 2018, and you are listening to Education with Ed. Now, just think about it. You've been listening on a regular basis. Ed's droned on and on and on, and he keeps repeating a lot of the same stuff. Well, there's a reason. There's a lot of living men and women out there who, unless they get it pounded into their head repeatedly over and over and over again, that itty-bitty LED bulb in their brain will not just do a little flicker. So he repeats himself quite a bit, not because he's getting senile or because he's old or because he's absent-minded, but because he's trying to drill in the basics and get those out there who are a little dense, okay, never mind, a lot dense, to actually comprehend what's happening. Ed, why don't you take that away?
thank you. You're absolutely true. And I'd like to thank everybody for joining us again. It is getting it drilled into people's heads. Because I keep talking to people all the time. They keep calling me, and then they want the suggestions. And it's amazing. You give them suggestions, you give them the information, and they don't get it still. And it's like trying to get these people to comprehend the facts. And I don't comprehend how they cannot comprehend when it's right there. You know, when it's right in front of their face, when all this information is there, and they still can't comprehending what the words mean. And that's what stuns me, how people don't get a lot of these words and what it means. And so it is interesting when people sit there and, want to complain, which I don't have a problem with. We all complain when it comes down to it. We all complain one way or the other. And so that is the one thing that sort of stuns me, how people don't get it. But people are getting it slowly, and I do get some people that, the light goes off, and I get some that don't get the light going off at all. And so it makes you wonder, with the structure of what they grew up with or what their surroundings growing up, How can you not get something when it's been stated more than twice or 50 times? And I guess sometimes I have to get into that too, because I've been to the same point where I didn't comprehend different things until the light went off in my head too. So I do comprehend that reality, and it is frustrating, and it is interesting when people don't get it. And so it is one of those things. And so the Constitution is the law of the land. Judges enforce, bar attorneys enforce international maritime law. You should know the difference and know how to handle it. And I got a lot of really good court cases that I were able to give, or congressional record cases. But, and judges, technically, we have two court cases that says judges do enforce statute codes and executive administrative rules. And then we do have another one that says judges do not enforce statute codes and administrative. Executive administrators enforce statute codes if public identities denies otherwise qualified individuals, meaning access to its services and programs or activities solely by the reason of his or her disability, that an individual might have an ADA claim against a public identity. That includes your public employees and servants. This is cited Alexandria and Charlotte 469 U.S. 287-301-22105. And It is SCT 71283 LED2D 61, and this was done in 1985. Is the other one, International Citations of Mint Lee versus City of Los Angeles. And so when a public servant violates their oath of office, it is capital treason under Title 18 USC 2381, criminal negligence. And debtors, slaves, monetary day slaves, which they want us to be, or they want us to believe we are the slaves and we owe them and we have to pay them. And speech does not lose its protection or character because of it embraces others. So if you want to use different words, and some people might call it racism, it doesn't work. There's court cases. You're entitled to your free speech. There is no such thing as racism. As soon as people start comprehending racism is a democracy political joke, and if you have to lower yourself to do those type of childish activities, I grew up, some of us grew up in a day where when you did the stupid things like that, people turn your back on you, the community or the people around you, and you weren't able to get employment and those type of things. You didn't have that. Instead of, what they're doing today, and it's democracy bullshit, because of democracy saying that we have to let all these terrorists come into our country. So, and that's the one thing that people don't realize. Immigration has no rights. They have privileges. And also, too, we, the natives, privilege against self-incrimination is neither accord to the passage of resistance. So, in other words, when it comes to self-crimination, that's the one thing that people don't get, keep your mouth shut. You think you're talking to a public servant and they're helping you out by speaking. Now, I tell you to go to a YouTube video that professors have put up. Don't talk to police. It's worth watching these videos. It's worth getting your knowledge and education out of these videos. Because we're not wasting our time doing this. We're trying to protect your bloodline. It's your bloodline, not mine. So that's the one thing that you've got to consider these things. And so when you get into this structure, and that's the one thing is paying attention to what goes on. And that's the one thing that when we're doing these type of things and these talk shows and these educational programs and getting the information out. And so let me get into this, like I brought up the other night. Artificial identity corporations cannot take oaths. They cannot make affidavits. So that means a district attorney, state attorney general, a judge, a police officer cannot make an affidavit because that's called a hearsay witness. They are not the actual injured party. So they can't make affidavits. And see, that's the one thing that they're allowing in courts today. And a lot of people are getting, innocent people are being convicted on these things. Innocent people. You got to remember, 60% of your court cases in your courts today shouldn't be there. But all it is making billions of dollars for the British government and the Queen of England. And as soon as you accept that your taxes don't go to anything of your services in your community, as soon as you accept that your taxes don't pay anything that you think are the national debt down. And I did do some research, and Donald Trump did pay 1/3 of the entire national debt out of his own assets. So when people go after Trump, he's doing a hell of a lot more than what these Democrats are saying. And all these people are sitting there going, oh, well, we need to go after Donald Trump. Well, how about you people go back to your country? Take your children and go home. We don't want you. Because, see, our country is a privilege for you to come here. It's not a right. You don't have a right to come to this country. This is not God's universe for you. This ain't the freedom place for the Vatican, as they keep telling everybody worldwide. The Vatican is a joke. All right? The Vatican don't care about you. They take the money. They prefer having children raped and sodomized because it's more income for them. And that's the one thing that people have got to compromise. This is a reality. I mean, it's all based on income. And it's based on a de facto dollar. And so we want to get into, you know, when you look at bonds, and I want to get into this when the bond is paid at the jail. Okay, they're not supposed to keep the money. I mean, I got the state of Oregon. When I was never convicted of anything, never been convicted of a crime, never done a crime. And the only thing, you know, when they went after me 2 years ago and did what they did to me, and I paid $10,000 of bail money, which they kept 10% of it. But they're saying now the state of Oregon can keep your money when they falsely accuse you. The state of Oregon is saying that, you know, they're allowed to rape, rob, and pillage you because you want to be raped. Your children want to be raped. That's exactly the way the governor feels. I mean, the governor had a lot of time to cape around to put some of these bills into effect to protect children, and actually the same thing is that we've already got laws in place, and they won't even enforce the laws that are there. And that is the saddest part we're dealing with. And it is sad that we are sitting there with our children going through this frustrating situation in our communities that's happening. And that's the one thing to make sure that you do comprehend. State officials are not exempt from the law. State officials may be held personally liable for damages based on actions taken in their official capacities. And so, and this is not that far of a law back. This is Harper versus Mallow, 502 U.S. 21 in 1991. So these public officials will tell you that you cannot go after them, that you cannot serve them, you cannot dictate to them what they can and cannot do. But let me advise you, yes, you can. They are public servants. You know, they don't have rights. See, this is the one thing that people need to comprehend on this structure, that we have rights, not privileges, and until you start standing up on your rights, you don't have a right. And see, this is the saddest part that's going on with us in our communities, and I really don't like communities because it is a British terminology word. And so I wanted to touch into tonight, too, dealing with our natives, and I try to get through a lot of natives people, and everybody keeps wants to arguing. And it's like, you already got laws to protect your water rights. How come you're not enforcing it? And I get sick and tired of these people going to wah, going, well, the public employee didn't do their job. They didn't do this. It's your job to file on them. You have to realize it is your employment and it's your employees that is your responsibility. And until you sit there and do this stuff and stand up for your children, your bloodline, your families. See, that's the one thing that people don't get when it comes to water rights. The Supreme Court has already dictated on these things, decided these things, been through these things, and they keep doing new circumstances today. And what stuns me is, like, when are people going to stop doing this stuff? But everybody wants to go to another book that doesn't even have any regulations, laws, or meaning to it. It really, you know, it's a great educational reader. That's about all I see. Myself personally, but that's me. I mean, I'm not into, into faith belief because, you got to have faith, and that's the one thing that, unless you have faith in whatever it is, I don't care if it's the middle of winter and you got faith because it's snowing and you need the snow. But that's what's going to happen anyways. It's going to rain, snow, or shine. Our weather doesn't change that much. It's not dramatically that much, and the only way it can be dramatically is done by HAARP, which a lot of people do know what HAARP means. And that's the one thing that has been proven, that HAARP does exist. It does work. But when it comes to your servants and you're sitting there making a complaint on these men and women, and I'm trying to get some of these people to comprehend this, You know, we've got people out there that are complaining that, Alex Jones' wife is one of those. When is she going to file? When is she going to stand up? When is she going to start learning? See, it's like the deal with water. You know, the United States Winters versus the United States. This was back in 1908. Was the United States Supreme Court case clarifying water rights of American Indian reservations. So the Indians own their damn water. When are you guys going to stop listening to these idiots? And when are you going to start growing up and be adults instead of little children still? And so people say, Ed, quit talking down to me. And I keep telling them, how can I not talk down to you? Because you're sitting there whining. You're not standing up for your children. You're not standing up for your water rights. You're not filing against the corporation men and women that are taking your water and destroying it, like Nestle Corporation. You know, you're sitting here going in this fantasy world that I'm going to pray and somebody's going to make a miracle happen. Is this going to stop? Well, Nestle has been stealing water for the West Coast here for over 20 years, been flooding the water system, the bottled water system in the stores, and it's your water. And then you go pay for the privilege to have life. So that's the one thing that stuns me. I mean, if somebody walks by my house and they need water, the garden hose is there. I'm not going to bitch, because I've done the same thing. See, I mean, when are we going to start living realistically? And that is the one thing that the point is about this conversation, is learning how to live realistically. Quit living in these fantasy things that we are led to believe, brought up to believe, and don't exist. And so once people start comprehending that they actually have rights instead of privileges, except for and excluding elected and public employees, registered immigrants, legal registered immigrants, contractors of our government, and that's the one thing we need to put a bill in for that one too, because we need to stop this stuff, what they're doing. But that's the one thing. I mean, I've been preaching on this for years myself. I've been seeing some changes, and the only basic change that we've had in this country for some time is a man called Donald Trump. And it's like, and everybody's wanting, it's going to end the Democratic Party. Well, sorry, take your Democratic Party and go back to England. We don't want your democracy. We never wanted it. We didn't want to believe in you. We don't want anything to deal with you. And until you folks start accepting this process that we have, that these immigrants are coming here and telling us how to live. Now, we do have some honorable men and women that are coming here honoring their oath of servitude, because they are a public, basically slave when it comes down to it, because they're not lawful bloodline Americans. They have to pay their dues, and that means 5 generations that they have to pay for. Until their 5th generation, they're not lawful American. Oh, I want to be a United States citizen. Well, okay, citizen, read what a citizen means. Citizen means you're a slave to the corporation. You have absolutely no rights. And if you don't do what you say or what the corporation says, oh, sorry, you go to jail. It's that simple. So, and then people want to bitch and moan and groan about what's going on around them. And how come you're the ones that are not standing up? How come you're the ones that are not working with your friends and neighbors and bringing these things to stop? Because, I got this one letter that I've got pumping out right now, dealing to the sheriff's departments, questioning the sheriffs about our rights to travel and stuff. I want to know, bluntly, what sheriffs are going to arrest people. I want to know, when I start traveling, what counties that I go into where I don't have to be afraid to be shot. And that's a realistic point of view, because that's the one thing that people don't realize. And I agree with, one gentleman always says, get everything certified, notarized, and they can arrest you anytime you want. You don't have nothing in writing for them to say that the Constitution exists. See, they go by a democracy system. They've already changed Oregon state administrative rules. They're trying to put this country, this state of Oregon, into a British exile of England. And I don't mean exile, we're shipping them out. I mean an exile that they're coming in, and we're the ones that are being exiled at. We're the ones that are losing our rights, which we have noticed. So what do you plan on doing about it? That's the point that we want to get more people involved and start changing these things. That letter that, like I said, will be out. I added a few more pages. Knowing me, I always write a book, but I had to do that because I wanted to clarify things. I did get carried away, but I wanted to also, too, put Dexter Johnson, legislative counsel's point of view on the rights to travel, because Dexter Johnson, legislative counsel for the state of Oregon, clearly stated that the Oregon state is supposed to be a Republican form of government, but instead is running like a democracy, and the legislators are, violating their own oath of office. And when you got legislative counsel speaking up on these things and nobody giving a damn, and everybody goes, well, I need to pay, or if you don't pay, we're worried about getting shot. Well, I think it's time that we start filing on these public employees and put them in prison. And get the damn military people that are retired up that actually care. Because I get tired of all these people, and it's like everybody keeps going that these military people keep committing suicide. Well, shit, when you find out you went to war and you didn't fight for your country, you fought for the corporation to go rape, rob, and pillage of other areas, and that's what's going on. They're allowed to go out there and do what they want because they call it wartime, so they can't be punished in war. Some do, but most of them get away. A lot of them go out and harm the women and children in the communities, and they get away with it when we have disasters and stuff like this going on that people claim. And that's the one thing that, when it comes down to this, we've got the solutions, we've got the monitoring, we've got the facts out there. So where are the people? Where are the people? Oh, everybody keeps going, my life is too simple. My life is the way I want it, because I go home when I get off work, put my feet up, watch TV, plug myself into another electronic device, and so I can go live in fantasy, so I don't have to deal with reality. And then they wonder why their children are having the problems. And that's the one thing, when you watch these children's surveys, when the state puts these things up, remember that mainly does include their kids that they have stolen, kidnapped, and held for ransom. So when they're talking about these children that have these mental problems, anger issues and stuff, hey, I've witnessed this from kids that grew up in DHS, kids that grew up with no security, bounced around in other people's homes, and they don't even know them. I mean, could you imagine being a kid brought to some stranger's home and you don't know what's going to happen? Anyways, literally, you don't know what's going to happen to you. You don't know what's going to happen in the time you're there. You don't know if you're going to be still there. I mean, a lot of these things what these kids go through in foster care is amazing, horrifying in some courses. I mean, DHS in the state of Oregon has deliberately gone out and made pornographic movies of children. Been caught doing it. Even used it in court cases, trying to say that is legit to film child's masturbating and stuff, and that's legitimate to do it in court cases. It amazes me how people come out to these things and they want to do changes, but they don't want to do changes. And a lot of people go out and they'll do a 501c3 children CPS type of activism stuff, which I always have problems with activists. Because people say, well, Ed, you're an activist. No, I'm not an activist. I've had newspapers around in the state of Oregon and Northern California write that I'm an activist. Well, I'm not an activist. I'm a man that sits there and sees what's going on and telling people what's going on. I don't want to have a title of nobility like an activist or an expert. That's a title of nobility. And see, that's the one thing, when you're claiming a title of nobility, that goes into commercial and commerce. So I don't want that title and nobility, because then that way I have to be liable to pay the damn debt of the damn British government. And I don't vote. I don't play those games. I'm not in that process. And that's the one thing that people need to comprehend, that point. And everybody wants to go in and do all this stuff and not pay attention. They want to go after and get people upset. And that's the one thing that just sort of shocks me. You know, I watched a lot of these parents that are even people around me. You know, we don't want to say certain things because we don't want to get the children upset. Well, I get sick and tired when people sit there and say you don't want to get the children upset, but you're willing to let them get hurt and offensive. You're willing to let them get assaulted. You're willing to let them get kidnapped by the state. Too many people say, well, that's not my responsibility. Let it become the state's. I mean, I've watched videos where I've watched people turn their own kids into the state. And that's the other thing that shocks me. And so when we're sitting there watching people turn their own family against one another and turn them into corporation slaves, because that's all they become. And that's the one thing that people need to realize, that that's a fact. That's a reality. And so when you start become a slave and those type of things and not protecting yourself, you know, that's the one thing that when it comes down to the Navy, you know, or the natives, you know, we've been through so much in this country. And we're still going through so much in this country. And what gets to me is that not everybody's standing up on these things for one another. They're not helping one another. They're not aiding one another. So there's a lot of people out there that are helping and banding together. But I get so disturbed when I see all these people going out there, and especially like the situation with the Bundys. You know, I mean, the Bundys could actually start doing some things. The Hammonds could stand up and start doing some things, but do they care? Hell no. They're asking you to please for them, care for them. I don't see them standing up and going, all right, let's go after these public employees. I mean, you sit there and you watch another cop being acquitted for murder when, where the hell were they filing the criminal complaints? How come they didn't file the murder complaints on the damn guy? How come they didn't do a damn goddamn thing? That's the one that gets to me. They don't do nothing but whine, bitch, and complain to you and I. They never filed a criminal complaint. They never filed criminal charges themselves. And then they go, oh, God's going to take care of it. What God? Where's God? Why God? Who's God? What is a God? Where is God? Why is there a God? I hate to say it that way, folks, but when you're sitting there going by faith instead of being a man or woman standing up for your bloodline and actually caring for your bloodline and proving to your children that this should not happen. See, that is the one thing that gets to me. They're not proving to their children that this stuff should not happen. They are proving to their children that, all right, it's acceptable for people to get away with this. And it's sad because so many people have got away with this stuff. Assault and battery. I know I've been assaulted by cops. I know I've been assaulted and hurt by these people too. So that is the one thing that I would like to see you guys start comprehending these things and bringing this truth forward. Because without these things, without these criminals being convicted of their crimes, without these criminals being convicted, that is the problems we are having. You know, Oregon State Police is laughing at you. Oregon State Police already got you on your radar going, okay, well, we don't know if we want to harass this man or woman today or not. And they do. Well, you think everybody keeps thinking that these things come up and that there is nothing there. There is. When you get pulled over by a cop, your history comes up. Your medical history comes up. They go, oh, no, it don't. Yeah, they lie to you. They have to come up because they have to know who they're dealing with. They have to know the history. Computer and modern-day technology is there. I mean, some states have issued or trying to force for you to pay your fine right on the highway. They got a damn bank machine that they run your credit card on the highway. And so some states have been doing that. Some states have got caught because it's been proven that's illegal. Of course, it always has been illegal, but people will sit there and go, I'd much rather pay a fine or deal with that. And we're seeing that through people around us. We are definitely seeing that around people around us. And so that's what sort of stuns me is how people are not speaking up on these things. How come that there was no criminal complaints filed? How come that there were no charges filed by the family itself? Oh, because their attorney says, don't do that, don't listen to that, don't do that. So that is the one thing that people have got to pay attention to, what the hell the truth is. Most people don't pay attention to the truth, do they? And so it's not being hard on these people, but it's like, come on, if you're proving to your children that you are standing up for them and for their deceased family members, then stand up for them. Quit bowing to them. Quit listening to all these other people. Read the law. Read what it says, what murder or assault is. File the charges. Man, woman, injured victims, corpus delicti, Title 18, 31, was it 3771, corpus delicti. You have to file that. If that's not filed in your court case, you mandatorily, 90% of the time, mandatory lose. Because you are not claiming you are an injured party, you are a victim, and you're not claiming it, and so you're allowing the state to say, okay, well, they want to be a corporate member, they don't want their rights, so we don't have to enforce their rights. And that's what these people get away with. We see it all the time. I mean, that's the one thing, I personally have dealt with this myself. I'm filing criminal charges myself. I have in the past. And I got more that I'm getting ready to start filing on. And then once I get this thing set out to all the sheriffs that I've been saying for the last couple of weeks now, but now I've got it down. I've got the other emails together. I got the stuff together. Now I can start formatting it and just get it down here in a couple hours. And then we'll get those posted. And then, like I said, I'm doing the city council, and I want to do each legislator. And that's the point, that you have to realize these points. That you have rights. Even if you're an immigrant, you have privilege rights. But when it comes to personal property damage, you have to claim this stuff. And that's the one thing I watch. So many people don't claim this stuff. They don't claim what's going on. They don't claim the personal and property damage. So that is the main thing. People don't claim it. So how do you expect it to be happening? And so when it does happen, and then when people speak up on it, it's like, speak up. But that was the one thing that so many people sent to several of these people criminal complaints that they could file. Criminal structures that they could actually file and levy on these men and women's personal assets and homes. And all these attorneys say, don't do that, don't do that. And all these people listen to these attorneys. Attorneys don't work for you. And yes, I keep repeating this stuff and beating it in people's heads, and it makes me frustrated because you watch this thing happen more and more. You watch these people coming out. Then you watch these people plead for money, and now they're selling T-shirts over it. They're selling all this stuff for profit. So to me, when it starts getting to that point, when it's based on a profit, it's like, did the man actually really matter? Because if it was all based on profit, that's a scary thought. And you have to consider those things. And it's not being negative. It's not being downplayed on it. But it's like, come on. It's like, when are we going to stand up? Because I know I sent stuff to them. I know that other people did. I know a lot of people spent hours working on stuff, sent them to them. And, you know, and then when, personally, I talked to two of their attorneys a while back, and they're like, you know, you shouldn't send them this stuff. They don't need to have this information. And I'm like, well, it's your job to inform them. How come you're not doing it? See, that's the one thing that disturbs me with elected and public officials. Remember, they're there to protect their jobs. Some will stand up. Most of them will turn a blind eye or put the back to the wall, so that way they see what's coming at them, because they don't want to know what they did in the past. They already know what they did, so they want to hide and they want to hide from it. And so this is what we're technically dealing with today. You know, we got attorneys. Most attorneys, 95% of attorneys, will not take these type of cases, period. And when they do, they write them up in a form that it's not a real affidavit. They write them up in a structure so that way the courts could dismiss it. And so that's the one thing you've got to realize, that, you know, these men and women, these lawyers do wonderful acting jobs. These are wonderful actors when it comes in the courtroom. You know, they're the only ones that I know that can show emotions on and off really easy, because that's their job. And so when we're going through this terrorizing structure, it's horrifying. It's like, you know, when the Hammonds got acquitted, how come they didn't write the criminal complaints? Like I said before, when the president acquitted all that, did that acquit the public employees so they're protected from lawsuits and for the damages? I mean, I've talked to some of the Hammonds and stuff over time here. And it's really, really frustrating when you do see this stuff going on. It's really frustrated when you watch these people going, well, you know, we want to see what the attorney says first. And it's like, in other words, you have no self-worth. You have no self-control over your life, that you're not willing to stand up for your family members like that. Because if that happened in my family, believe me, I'd be going after that public servant. I'd make sure that anything that public servant made was never passed in inheritance, because that money should be, and the assets should go to the injured parties, 100%. Should not go to their children at all. Sorry, kids. But they have to pay for the damage that they did when they were employed. And the laws are clear on those things. So when a public servant violates his oath of office, when a public servant violates his employment, and that means you have to file with the 1938 Foreign Registration Act as well with these employees to see if they're registered. You'd want a copy and demand a registration copy. And if they're not registered when you file on them, you want them charged, arrested, put in prison, as the law says. And that's what I'm going to be setting up here pretty soon, because I'm doing that, and that's basically what I wrote in the letter to the sheriffs, too. And those letters will be not only sent to the White House, to Trump, they'll be sent to the State Attorney General, they'll be sent to Jeff Sessions, and they'll be sent to the Department of Justice beside the state legislators. But I want to make sure this thing is known, because, see, if, you know, I mean, I don't have state IDs and all that stuff, and I'm told if I travel, I'll be shot on the site. And so this is not the way we're supposed to be living in America. This is exactly what people in Nazi Germany lived in Nazi Germany. And you are living in Nazi Germany in a sense right now today, because you've got police officers out breaking windows and destroying things. Your property, breaking in your home, stealing stuff out of your cars. And people don't make criminal complaints. Because believe me, I would love to start doing some seminars out here in the public on this stuff. I really would like to set up some seminars and start doing this publicly, because I think it's time that this really comes out in a fashion publicly like that, instead of the way we've been doing it like this. Because it's not. Some people are getting it. I watched people written some really good cases recently. They're getting it. They are putting in, and they're finally getting it to put the corpus delicti in their stuff. Because I was even told that by a federal judge. If you don't put that you're the injured party, hey, that's the number one dismissal for us. We like it when people do that. Because remember, a judge gets paid, the clerk gets paid, the recorder gets paid, the secretary gets paid, the bailiff gets paid. And by the way, you know, isn't it interesting that the sheriffs are technically not even supposed to be on the street? They're supposed to be in the courtroom monitoring your courtroom. That's what the courts say. That's what the law says, administrative rules say. And so it's knowing the difference of what a law is, because when somebody tells me it's the law, and even public employees, and I said, no, that's a statute, code, administration, the Constitution is the law of the land. So tell me where that Constitution states this. Oh, and that's the one thing when you go to a traffic court or any type of court, you're the terrorized man or woman by a public servant, and they're trying to bring these what they call charges. Remember, all these violations of stuff are violations. They're not criminal charges. They can't file criminal charges on you. So even when it comes to an auto accident, the cops can't file criminal charges on you for if you did something wrong in the accident. The only one that could do that is the injured party. And that's the one thing that needs to be brought out and explained to the general public. And most of these people, when you bring it out, some of them get it, some don't get it. And also, too, we're not bringing it out on a much larger scale yet, which we got to work on that one, because we need to bring this out on a bigger schedule and start bringing this out so people can start comprehending that if they have rights or if they have privileges, but knowing how to defend themselves in privileges. And so that's the one thing that we're all getting confused about, or we all have these differences. So I do want to get into next week. I'm going to be setting up, because I'm thinking it's time that we get into the maritime court system a little bit more deeply, and I want to get into the Lieber Code. Because people have different opinions, but let's get them up on the table. Let's bring them forward, and let's start bringing these things out. Because we need to, that's why I'm putting this letter out to the sheriffs, and then they'll go out to the city and council. And this is what you folks need to do, too, because we need to know where these public employees stand. We need it from them in writing. And if they don't respond, then we file criminal charges on them, because by law they have to respond. They're a public servant. If they don't respond when a public employer, that's who we are, they're employers, when they don't respond, they have to pay fines and stuff. And that is law. And so we have to make sure that that law is put in place for us. We have to make sure that that law is standing for us. And we have to make sure it's enforced for us. And the one way to do that is also to do a mailing on it, emailing out to everybody's friends and stuff like that, which I'm going to be doing too. I'll have all those things posted up on the Facebook site, on my site, with a link for people to go to. But see, a lot of things that comes down to it, there's a lot of men and women like myself, you know, we don't always like to be the crosshair standing up in the middle of an open field at 1,000 yards. Because we don't know what kind of ammunition or what arm they're trying to use at that point. You know, because I mean, a good odd 6 hits anything at 500 yards, no problem. 1,000 yards is reaching out there unless you've done a lot of target practice. But that's the one thing that people have got to start looking at these things. We're facing these things. And so you comprehend, we're not lawyers, we're not attorneys. We're basically no names, nobody, you know. And actually, there's a good Western movie called Nobody. But that's the one thing that when it comes down to these things, how are we going to solve the problems? Now, we got a few of us working on these things. We are seeing more and more people homeschooling their kids, and I'm going to getting responses on that. And we are trying to get more and more the homeschooling links up. We'll try to get that up in the next 2 weeks for people, because we've got a lot of stuff that we need to get on homeschooling up, because when people are homeschooling and they're going, well, you're talking all this stuff, Ed, but you got nothing from homeschooling for my kids. How do we teach the kids? And so I'm listening to what people are saying out there. I'm getting it, but, there's only so much that we can do, because, we're basically, two guys on a one-horse ride. And it would be nice to see other people helping out a little bit more, but we realize that people can only do what they can do. And so we have, I think we set up a link yet, but we will be asking for people to help out to keep the website going. Because we noticed the website is getting a lot more hits. I mean, some days we're hitting 100, 110 people a day. People are going to the site. I watch it. I see what's going on. I see what's happening on the Facebook site, too, when we're getting hits and that type of stuff. But it's interesting, because, I've been publicly speaking out on some of these situations, with the Hammond and Bundys, and who knows what these people are saying in the back door, to what, we've done, or other people around us have done, that have written to help these people out, that have done these things successfully. And we want to see that, we would like to see them actually stand up. Just because the court just acquitted the cop for murder, yeah, like I told them, I personally talked to them ahead of time. Make sure that you get a constitutional jury. Make sure you get a constitution judge. Make sure his oath is there. Do not allow a grand jury of 6. Well, a grand jury of 12, which they did have, apparently. But how many of those were elected and public employees? How many of those were put in by the court coordinator? You got to remember, these court cases, when they're set up, they review this stuff. They ask you questions before the court case. So they review this stuff, and they already know pretty much what you're going to say or deny. That's how they pick these juries today, of who's doing what. I was in a jury where I got convicted. They convicted me for my house being robbed by Toledo Police Department. And the jury was 3 of the judge's personal friends that I personally knew, too. And I argued that point. And it's like, we're going to proceed. I'm going, no, we're not. And that's the one thing that, you got to just have these things on records from when you go back to appeal on it. And so when it comes to that point, which I'm going to be doing on that one, I got to finish that one and go up on it before their administrative time slot runs out. But I can prove everything in that deal, and that's the frustrating point, when these people in your community keeping it quiet, keeping it done. And then sometimes the newspapers help out with writing a real story, and then sometimes they write cover-ups, because it depends on who their family friends are in the circumstances. So when you're going to these things and you're dealing with public employees in these court cases and these administrative like DHS and DMV and stuff, you got to remember, friends, family, who they went to school with, who were their friends they grew up. It all ties in together. See, that's the one thing I don't know how some people don't step out of that production of the movie and analyze it. Do the research and see. I already sort of told people what was going to happen in the outterm of that court case before it even started, before they even announced they were going to do it. And I already told people they had a court case. They're going to end up dismissing the court case. But you try to tell people. Now, when they cold-bloodedly murdered a man, it doesn't matter if it's a public employee or not. That was cold-blooded murder. Nobody should get away with that. But too many people are getting away with these type of criminal charges from our public employees. And that's the one thing that when you start realizing that they're your public employees, and you have to start standing up and doing something about it. like what we're doing. We're getting these letters out. We got more contacts going out. And, I'm getting response from more and more people. And I'm finally getting a little bit more response from a few more Oregonians on this that are starting to get more and more interested because they're realizing that their income has depleted, gone down, especially with all these new taxes that Kate Brown has put in. I mean, she's even put in one where they want to personally monitor your bank accounts. They already do it anyways. And people say, no, they don't. Yes, they do. I tell you. And especially if you're on the system, you'll give all that information over to the system. They tell you, if you don't give it to me, we're not going to give you any services. Well, okay. So that's why I don't get state services. Even though by law they're supposed to do that because I'm disabled. But I'm not having them coming into my home and deciding if I should live the way that one of their employees decide I should live. And I've had public employees call me up on disability with my health and the things I've gone through. And, well, we want to come up and do basically a home inspection and see how you're living. And I tell them, you come up here, I got Smith & Wesson for you. Who? You're threatening me. I said, no, I didn't. I didn't threaten you anything. I was Smith & Wesson cooking oil. Haven't you ever heard of that? It's like, don't put your foot in your mouth and say something that it's a threat. Smith & Wesson is a cooking oil. Let people's own imaginations wander and then, follow it up. Here's the truth, And they know it. They're getting it. And with this letter going out that I've already started sending it out, actually. And I've got a waiting list of about 30 people from people in the counties of 30 counties in Oregon that are waiting for that letter, too. And so people are picking up. They are paying attention. And when it gets posted, that letter, well, I know it's going to make one of the newspapers are going to write about it. I know that's good. Somebody's going to have to say something about it because not everybody could keep that so hush-hush when we're charging them, because then if I don't get a response, then I have to file the criminal charges on them for not doing their job. I already read you one of the deals that if they don't respond, here's the law. Their law, their administrative rules, that their law they have to follow. Free men and women, so long as you don't do purposeful and property damage, you don't have to follow these administrative rules unless you're in the corporation one way or the other. So there's a lot of things that people do not step out of the movie, watch the production. We don't pay attention to what's going on a lot of the times. And this is what hurts us. And this is what hurts the children around you, in your neighborhood. Things around you. And that's the one thing that you have to realize, that these things are here to protect you if you stand up and learn the protection. And that is the one thing, that is the one thing to do. Pay attention to what's going on around you. Stand up. Bring these things up. And when you talk to these people, ask them why they never file these charges. Well, that's the one thing. These people need to know why they didn't file the charges. I mean, that's the one thing. They're waiting for somebody going to answer some prayer. Well, okay, your prayer was answered. They gave you a court date. They gave you a jury trial. Then they sat there and said, oh, it's okay. So these people could have had a movement going behind them that would have put our administrative rules back in place. Really, truly. They would have put our administrative rules back in place. If they would have stood up and really done something about this. And I mean, believe me, I know several hundred people who have tried to give the information to them, who gave them information. I've been watching this stuff going back and forth on this for the last 2 years, well, 3 years. And that's the one thing too. When you try to explain to them, oh, here's the law, and the mule refuge is owned by the people of Oregon, not the state, not the federal government. It was returned over to us, 2006. The Secretary of State back then even wrote a structure on it. I put that out. How come nobody got that? So it does make you frustrated on things that go on, and I know I'm not the only one. I know other people are out there getting frustrated. And so the thing is like, for those other ones, all right, let's work together. Let's get something done. Let's make sure it happens. We can make these things happen. We can make these changes, and we're going to start making them. I mean, putting the correct letters out, the correct information. So anyhow, like I said, I plan on getting into more next week. We got some more research I've got to start doing myself. So when I start reading this stuff, I could say it a little bit more clear and confident of knowing what I'm reading and what I'm supporting. And that's the one thing that people need to realize too. What are you reading? What are you supporting? Who are you supporting? Are you supporting we the people, or, even we the people is a British terminology? Or are you supporting natives, or are you supporting foreigners? See, that's the one thing that people need to comprehend too. Who are you supporting? And if we're not supporting our own country, then we're in sad shape. And people have got to come to the conclusion that that's what has to happen. So anyhow, I think we'll open up the floor, see if anybody's got anything else to say. And I do get frustrated where I keep repeating. And the reason why I do this, because I watch emails go back and forth. I pay attention to what's being said on Facebook going back and forth with people who are saying things. I get people that will put messages and other messages that send it to us, so we get to know what's going on. We look at these things. So it's just one of those things to pay attention. And so it is your responsibility to file the criminal charges on these public employees. It's your responsibility. It's nobody else's responsibility. We haven't seen a district attorney that actually filed and done something correctly. So it is one of those things that, what are we going to do? When are we going to do it? How are we going to do it? And start protecting the children. So it is one of those things to look at. So anyhow, why don't we open up the floor, and then we'll see what goes on from there.
All participants are unmuted.
Anybody would like to add anything?
Ed,
yeah.
Exactly how would you find out which people would be good for a constitutional jury?
Constitution jury, when you're filing for a jury, because you're the one to get witness it, you want to make sure that there is absolutely no elected and public employees on it. And on the jury's request, they actually have a questionnaire on jury request, and you want to know who stands by the Constitution and who just don't believe or support it. Because you can support anything, if that makes sense, but doesn't mean you're going to go follow through with it. So you want to make sure that people know the Constitution. And that is one of the questions you ask your jury members, too. Ask them what they believe in the Constitution. Do they support the Constitution? And so that helps a lot to know if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. I was just kind of wondering how to narrow it down to ensure that you're getting the right people on the jury, and not like what you said, somebody's friends or neighbors or whatever.
Yeah, and you have to ask that question to jury members. Do you know any of these other members on a jury? Have any of you had contact with them? Do you personally deal with them? And those are questions you literally can't ask. And I recommend people do ask those type of questions, if that makes logical sense. You're asking them to prove that if they are, they ain't. So that's one thing we could do. Go ahead.
Just another question. Would it be feasible to ask if anybody, to make sure that the jury is a lawful bloodline?
You could ask that too. Ask them if if their family's here 5 or more generations. Absolutely.
And if they comprehend what that means.
Yes, that is a good one there, too, to see if they comprehend what it means. And that's where people need to sit there and know that difference and know what they're saying. So, yeah, it's well worth asking those questions.
May I?
So, yes, go ahead.
Probably one of the most important things, more important things in a way, is ask them if they're a member of the public employee retirement system, as the judge and the prosecutor are.
Mm-hmm.
Because I don't want a jury member that's got a conflict of interest.
That's right. And that's the one thing, too. That's a good idea, is ask for a written statement from them that they don't have a conflict of interest. Because if so, you could hold them liable afterwards. And so that is a valid point. You want to see if they have a conflict of interest. You want to know if they don't or do. And you want to make sure, you know, that they're not connected to a contractor or a public employee that might be able to sway their opinion while they're going through this so-called trial. If it's not an injured party or property damage, and it's one of these corporation structures for them to make financial gain of it. Remember, all these elected in public, the mayor, the city council, all these people are getting paid. They're already getting paid, so they already have a conflict of interest. And that's the one thing that people need to realize, that these men and women have a conflict of interest already, because if they are in a federal retirement employee system, that's a conflict of interest right there. So those are things that to think about when you're going to these court cases. You know? Yeah, we know the rooster has been up for a few hours.
Right.
So anybody else got anything they'd like to pitch in here? I see you fixed the UNIL counter, huh? So anybody else got anything they would like to add tonight? So I guess we'll end up making tonight another short one, a little short. But we'll give one more try. Anybody else would like to add any of the comments or something they're working on or something to bring up? Or
Well, you know, the counter's got to be, up there.
Yeah, I know.
Holy crap, he does know.
Yes, I know. I didn't say the other. I said I know.
Oh, I didn't count it.
I know that. I see it. So, but that's the one thing too. When you're doing your court cases on these things, bring these things up.
My wife did bring up a good point. How can anybody comprehend any of the stuff that you talk about if they don't have anything but anything above a 9th grade education?
You know, I call bullshit on that bullshit.
That's not bullshit.
It is, because I have a 9th grade education.
Well, that's the thing.
That's all I went to school.
You educated yourself on a lot of other things beyond that.
Yeah, I self-educated myself.
Right. Most Americans out there, they'll go to college and become specialized in one little itty-bitty thing, or they'll just go to trade school or go back to the farm or do what they want to do, kind of thing.
Yeah, that's true.
But the high schools, when they get, by the time they're 12th grade, by the time they graduate high school, they are effectively a 9th grade education.
No, that's college, hon.
Oh, college is a 9th grade education?
Oh, yeah, college. They dumbed everybody down since 1980.
Right. So, again, how can they comprehend it if they've been dumbed down to 9th grade?
Well, it's like the things that we talk about. Read it. Pull it up on the internet. Go to your dictionary. Cross-reference it. Learn how to educate yourself and be smarter than the next man or woman. Cross-reference things. Go through Black Law Dictionary. Go through Bovier's and go through your Webster Dictionary. Cross-reference these things.
Well, I agree with that completely. It's just the aspect of try to get
Getting people off their ass and doing it, I know.
right. And of course, you're always like, get away from the video games, but you know.
Yeah, I know. You know that I know. You know, but sometimes those you knows have to do those things because they need a sanity break because that's their way of getting their break.
Yep, I am a major gamer. I started gaming when I was a little kid. Played Dungeons and Dragons, did a whole bunch of other video games and stuff, and I'm still here learning as fast as I possibly can.
That's true, and I do miss Pac-Man.
Which one? Pac-Man or Miss Pac-Man?
Well, both originals. I mean, I remember all these things when they came out in the 80s.
I would have thought...
they had them...
Oh, there it is, another one. Okay.
Yeah, they had them stuffed in all the bars when you went around in the 80s.
Oh, yeah. Of course, I'd be at the bars.
Well, back then I worked in the bars. So, yeah, they were in the bars.
Yeah. All right, well, if we're going to be shutting down, let's shut down unless somebody else got something to say.
Nobody's got anything to say. They're not speaking up. So, with that, we'll say, may the Great Spirit bless you. May Mother Earth feed you, produce life, and may the Creator take care of all of us.
And I would like to say thank you for joining us. It is today, which is also Sunday, August 12th, 2018. And remember, the website does have quite a bit of information, and there's a pamphlet up there in 7 parts done by one of the listeners here that basically explains how here in Oregon 99.9% of the judges are not Constitution judges. They don't have a Constitution oath of office, and even if they thought they did, the one that presided over their oath may not have had a Constitution oath of office, which means both oaths are null and void immediately. So,
that's a valid point. Good, valid point.
So effectively, all these judges are committing fraud.
Mm-hmm. Domestic terrorism.
Yep, domestic terrorism, which, don't we have DHS on that?
Yes, and don't forget that's the other term is mainly that Trump's talking about is human trafficking. Because that is human trafficking for personal financial gain out of public resources.
All right, then. Basically, guys, go look at the website. It should be under the resources section. I would show you, but I showed you last week, and I hate repeating myself. Unlike Ed, he likes to repeat himself.
Not exactly. But we're gonna start doing topics. We gotta start doing some topics here.
I agree. Lawful topics.
So, yeah, and anybody's got suggestions for topics, don't be bashful. Emailing them in. Get them to us.
I already got a suggestion. The Bill of Rights. Every Sunday till we get through the first 10 Bill of Rights. Let's do one Bill of Rights per week.
That's a good suggestion. We can start doing that.
I mean, the first Bill of Rights is freedom of religion, speech, press, freedom to assemble, and freedom to redress grievances.
And your freedom of religion is for you in your home. It's not for you to sit there and tell everybody else, what your religious belief is. Unless they want to enjoy into that conversation, that's a different subject. But, I'm not a religious man at all. And so when it comes to religion, that is something that is a personal faith, a personal belief, and a personal thought. It's not everybody believes in what somebody's religion is.
I agree. It's
Yeah.
like if you believe in something, then you believe in it. If you want others to join in and join your religion, then how can your religion actually be fulfilling and satisfying if you cannot do it by yourself or by your family? That you have to forcefully, and going out and recruiting is a forceful recruitment. Telling people about your religion constantly, I mean, basically that's stating that you are so insecure in your religion that you need to have numbers to make you feel secure enough that it might actually happen. But that's just my opinion. That is not a fact, but if you study human psychology, that old saying, misery loves company, well, look at religion. They really like companies. Does that mean religion is misery? So, all right, that'll be it for tonight, guys. Otherwise, we're going to just keep on going on stuff like this and probably piss a bunch of you off that have had that cornerstone of your life cracked by now. So, catch us next week. Things will be a little bit better, a little bit faster, a little bit easier. I'm slowly working on getting all the production side of this getting better and better. So, have a good night and enjoy your weekday. Do not work too hard. And seriously, anything you weren't sure about what Ed said, go research it. Hell, even if you think you're sure about whatever was said, go research it. See if you can come up with a different point of view or a different viewpoint on it, and bring it up. So, have a good night, and we'll see you next.